VJ, if you want to be a good pastor, you have to have the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other. That was the piece of advice I got, really helpful for me early on when I was becoming a pastor, that I think is relevant, not just for me, but for the church, that we need to know who Jesus is, and we read Scripture for that. And we need to know what's going on in the world, because God is at work in the world, and our faith is about everyday life. But can I tell you a pro tip? Because I have the Bible app and news apps, I can have the Bible and newspaper all in one hand, which leaves this hand free for coffee. Or maybe a stiffer drink, depending on what you're reading in the newspaper. Man, one of the things that happens, I think, when you read both the Bible and the newspaper is you find yourself asking, what is wrong with the world? Like, this is crazy. The world is a mess. You ever get that? Like my neighbor Fab, Fab, if you're listening today, this is a shout out to you. I'm not giving you any royalties for this, but every time I see him, or every so often, we'll be, shoveling our driveways or talking, and he's like, good Italian in Woodbridge, Vij, what's wrong with the world? Right? We have that question when we see the world that's going on around us. But can I just say this? I think that subtly can turn to like, bro, what's wrong with people? Why are people such a mess? Why is the world such a mess? Which I think is kind of moving towards what happens when we do a lot of reading or being aware of what's going on in the world around us, is who's to blame for what's wrong with the world? Like, who's to blame for what's wrong with the world? In fact, I just did a little survey of the front page or the home page of the news app that I read regularly, and what I noticed was not just reporting on the news, not just reporting on what's going on in the world, not just reporting on what's wrong with the world, but actually many of the articles and headlines assigning directly or indirectly blame for what's going on in the world. Here's just a survey of just this last week when I looked on one day on the home page. A government agency is to blame for its mismanagement. A judge is to blame for his bad ruling. Teachers are to blame. The Board of Education is to blame. The Prime Minister of this country is to blame. The President of another country is to blame. The country as a whole is to blame, one article is saying. Someone's neighbor is to blame. The police are to blame. The religious organization, such and such, is to blame. This lobby group is to blame. I don't think the world is worse than it was in the past. I think we just know more of what's going on in the world. And I think when we know more of all of the things that are going wrong in the world, it is easy for blame to grow, where we start maybe because we feel powerless or afraid or frustrated of what's going on, that blame starts to, like, who's to blame for what's going on? Like, why isn't this person fixing it? Or the people who could do something aren't, or the people who are causing problems, they're the ones to blame. And this is kind of a dangerous thing that can begin to grow in us. And in a sense, because we have the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other, people of faith or pastors or churches can begin to use the Bible as a pointed finger to blame others for what's going on in the world. Oh, well, they took prayer out of schools, or this is what happens. And that, in a sense, self-righteousness and blame can grow in faith communities. Pastor and author Rick Warren said this one time. I remember actually hearing him live, and as he was speaking, he just kind of on the side just said, the church is supposed to be a body that does good things in the world. He said, but in many ways and at many times, we're a body with like no arms and no legs, and all we are is a mouth that speaks out angrily for what we're against. Right? What does it mean that communities can sometimes drift towards that place, that communities of faith, that the more righteous we are, in a sense, the more we are blaming others and the world for what's going on in it. And that's why, as we are in this series that we have called The Well is For, in part I wanted to just go, oh, the well is for, period, because we don't want to become a community that is against. That it's very easy for communities of faith, as we read honestly what's going on in the world, and as we gather and to pray and to think about it, and we look honestly at what's going on in the world, it's very easy for blame to grow and for communities of faith or churches to become against. And so what does it mean to be for? And we're looking to Scripture every week, really looking to God and say, God, fill in this sentence for us. What does it mean for us as we finish 20 years as a church? What are we for? I think what one of the things that we have to be very honest about as a community, as they think about this, what are we for, is that when blame grows in a person or in a community or in a faith community, two other things grow with it that make it very dangerous. That it's easy for anger and inaction to grow when blame grows, right? That our sense of as blame, the more we think about who isn't doing what they could do, whose plans aren't fixing what needs to be fixed, or who's the cause for the problem in this place and that place, it's easy for anger with those people or with those institutions that, in a sense, the news cycle itself can sound angry or can make us angry as we think about who's to blame, that anger can grow. And that can be seen in our own lives and in individuals or people who are always complaining or whatever, or even communities can become cultures that are blame cultures. But then alongside just as bad is that inaction can grow. That as I continue to focus on what other people aren't doing, what other people should be doing or whatever, I'm slowly, progressively taking myself off the hook for having any responsibility to do anything about it. As blame grows, so does anger, and so does inaction. And my friends, as a community of faith, we do not want to be that way. We don't want to let blame take us over. And this is what can often happen even in communities of faith. C.S. Lewis in his book, The Screwtape Letters, it's a fascinating sort of fictitious exploration of a letter exchange between a senior devil, Screwtape, and his young pupil, a junior devil, Wormwood. And of course, as I'm saying this, it's fictitious. But Lewis, it was his way of writing, how does evil work itself out in our lives? And it's like a senior devil teaching a junior devil. This is how you get people. And listen to what he says in one of the sections of the letter that Uncle Screwtape is writing to his pupil, Wormwood. Advice from a senior demon to a junior demon. Do what you will. There's going to be some benevolence, like kindness, and some malice and anger in your patient soul. That's us. He's talking about humans. The great thing is to direct the malice to his immediate neighbors, whom he meets every day, and thrust his benevolence out to the remote circumference, in other words, places far away, to the people he does not know. The malice thus becomes wholly real, present, and the benevolence largely imaginary. Isn't that fascinating? And I've actually seen this even with people who get really concerned with global issues of what's happening over there in some other country, and they have compassion for those people, and yet that compassion produces anger towards the people who are right in front of them. That they are angry with the people around them, and that there's violence and outbreaks because of issues that are moving their heart that are far away. And Lewis says this is exactly what can happen with us, that we can be compassionate for causes and people in places we've never been and will never go, and we're far away, and our compassion and benevolence and kindness sits out there, and what results for the people immediately around us is anger. Which is why God rescues his people over and over and over from experiences of blame. If he really loves us, he's not going to let blame take over us as a community so that anger and inaction grow. Instead, God invites us to be for. To be for. And I want to read for you a portion of a letter from a prophet to God's people, and this is not unique to this particular chapter. This echoes a kind of conversation that God has and continues to have many times with his people to rescue them out of these postures of blame which lead to anger and inaction. It was written by the prophet Isaiah in around 700 BC to Israel, who was a nation state at that time, but who was in a place where things were not good around them, where they would have said, man, what's wrong with the world? Where they were thinking about the good old days when they used to be economically independent and strong, the economy was good, when they trusted their leaders, when they had good leadership, when God seemed to be blessing them, when everything was working out in their favor, and they were remembering those good old days and saying, oh, that was better. Then they were angry with what was going on in the world around them. Listen to what God says to the prophet. And this is actually kind of a stunning passage. And as I said, it's not the only time that this kind of conversation appears. But I want you, don't just analyze it, feel it. As God is speaking, in a sense, first person to the prophet to tell my people, this is what I'm saying. And he says to the prophet, shout with the voice of a trumpet blast. Shout aloud, don't be timid. Here's what you say. Tell my people Israel of their sins. Yet they act so pious, in other words, so holy and righteous. They come to the temple every day, and they seem delighted to learn all about me. They act like a righteous nation that would never abandon the laws of its God. They ask me to take action on their behalf, pretending they want to be near me. We have fasted before you, they say. Why aren't you impressed? We've been very hard on ourselves, God, and you don't even notice it. I will tell you why, I respond. It's because you're fasting to please yourselves. Even while you fast, you keep oppressing your workers. What good is fasting when you keep on fighting and quarreling? This kind of fasting will never get you anywhere with me. You humble yourselves by going through the motions of penance, bowing your heads like reeds bending in the wind. You dress in burlap and cover yourselves with ashes. Is this what you call fasting? Do you really think this will please the Lord? No, this is the kind of fasting I want. Free those who are wrongly imprisoned. Lighten the burden of those who work for you. Let the oppressed go free and remove the chains that bind people. Share your food with the hungry and give shelter to the homeless. Give clothes to those who need them, and do not hide from relatives who need your help. Then your salvation will come like the dawn, and your wounds will quickly heal. Your godliness will lead you forward, and the glory of the Lord will protect you from behind. That's when you call. Then when you call, the Lord will answer. Yes, I'm here, he will quickly reply. Remove the heavy yoke of oppression. Stop pointing your finger and spreading vicious rumors. Feed the hungry and help those in trouble. Then your light will shine out from the darkness, and the darkness around you will be as bright as noon. The Lord will guide you continually, giving you water when you are dry and restoring your strength. You'll be like a well-watered garden, like an ever-flowing spring. Some of you will rebuild the deserted ruins of your cities. Then you will be known as a rebuilder of walls and a restorer of homes. This is a really stunning passage, actually, and words that would have been not only difficult for God's people to hear, but maybe even confusing to them. God actually is pointing out the fact that they are going through the motions of worship and they look like people that are really committed to God. But he says, I don't like it. I don't want this kind of worship, or if we can use modern day language, this is not what I want a church to be like. And he points out a kind of emptiness in their worship that is resulting in misplaced anger and deadly inaction. That in a sense is coming from blame. In verse 2 and 3, it's like he says, I know what you're saying. God, look, we're worshiping, we're fasting, we're doing hard spiritual things, we're praying, and you're not doing anything to bless us in return. God, where are you? We're doing all these good things as a church. Isn't this what you want us to do? To worship, to fast, to pray, to give, to come and gather, and to be devout in our practices of religion. Isn't this what you want? God says, no, I don't want that. You know why? Because you have a growing sense of blame and anger and inaction. And he's actually putting his finger on this is several of the prophets, all the way through the Old Testament, and then Jesus in his message to the New Testament community, and all the way through up till this present day. The temptation that religious communities have to, in a sense, retreat from the world that is difficult and complex and have a bunker mentality and a bit of us versus them, and the world is bad and those are enemies and those people are against. Let's just get together and worship and pray and encourage each other and hide ourselves from the evil world and all the mess that's going on around. This is a problem clearly that's at least 2,700 years old. And God says, I don't want you to do that, because what you have is growing anger and growing inaction. Look what he says in verse 9. Stop pointing the finger. Stop blaming each other. This is what's going on. You are blaming each other and angry with each other. And in fact, he says, you're blaming me. You're mad at me. You're like, God, we're doing all this stuff. We're doing everything you want. Why aren't you helping us, right? This is God's fault. That's kind of what they're saying. He's like, oh, this is really good. You're blaming me and each other. I mean, this is literally what Adam did in the garden, right? When God caught him in sin, he blames his wife and then blames God for giving him his wife. A classic move. But that's what's happening. They're blaming God. We're doing all this stuff. You're not helping us. How come you're not fixing the problems in the world? How come you're not making our lives better? We're doing everything you want, aren't we? And then they're pointing the finger at each other. God was warning his people. Don't use your faith community. Don't use your gathering to hide from the problems and the complexity in this world. And in a sense, have this us versus them and this pointed finger at the world out there and each other and even me. Instead, he says, be for the city. The reason I'm not happy with all your religious gatherings and I'm not answering your prayers and I'm actually calling all this stuff kind of empty, and I'm actually calling you out and saying, you look like you want to know me. You look like you want to be near me, but I know you're not. And how does he know that? Because he points out the duplicitousness and the blame and the inaction and the anger that's in them. He says, in fact, look at what's right in front of you. Verse 3 and 6, he talks about workers, people that work for you, that are being taken advantage of, that are oppressed. Some of them may have been foreign workers, people around them that they were treating like slaves, or they were not treating properly or not taking care of. He says, you pay attention to the people you actually work with and who work for you and who are all around you. Verses 7 and 10, there's hungry people around you. You need to share your food with them. Verse 7, you need to open your homes to the homeless. You have relatives, verse 7, that are in need that you're ignoring. People, your own flesh and blood. And then he says the city you're in has deserted ruins. Talks about the walls of the city. The walls of a city were the things that created a sense of protection and stability and safety and thriving. They were a symbol of thriving, safe, stable city. He says there's all parts. You can literally see that from your front door. You can see the walls of the city that are broken down that you don't seem to care about. He says, be for the city, the people and place that is right in front of you. It's like he's calling out, he's saying, hey, I need you to use a different body part. Instead of using a pointed finger, right? Instead of having this attitude of blame towards the world out there, towards me, you're blaming me for not doing what you want, not answering your prayers, and you're blaming each other. Instead of using your finger to point out blame all around you, he says, hey, look at the end of your nose. What's right in front of you? What's right there? I think I have read this passage several times before, but I didn't realize how you could read this as like, hey, don't just go to worship, make sure you care about the poor, or make sure you care about injustice in the world, and I think that's true. But there's a sense in which he's pointing them to something very close to them, the proximity of these needs. These are things right in front of you. He talks about your own workers, the people that are in your company or in your household. They would have had workers in their household, maybe workers in the business, of people literally right in front of them. Your own employees, the own people that you work with or that you go to school with, in a sense, proximity. Your own family, your own flesh and blood, your food. He says, share your food, the food you have. And he doesn't say, hey, start a program to fix homelessness in the city. You have a home. Offer shelter to people who don't have a home. You have clothing, clothe those who need it. Look at the end of your nose instead of using your finger to point out blame. There's an immediate proximity that's directing to us. And if I could put it in our present day language, stop blaming your government and big business for not fixing the problems that are in this world. Stop looking for organizations and solutions out there and programs and social action and all this stuff and lobby groups to fix what's wrong in the world. He says, look at you. You have room at your dinner table. You have food in your fridge. You have people that you work with, that you work for, who work for you. You have people that you go to school with. You have clothes. You have extra. You yourself, not the government, not big business, not, quote, the church, not some social action program. You. God's not letting us off the hook by blaming others, having a bunker mentality about our faith and saying, oh, this is the world, it's the problems out there. If the prophet was speaking to us today, he'd be saying, hey, what food do you have? What space in your home do you have? What relational connections and opportunities do you already have with the people you work with and the people you see? He's asking us to think about our lives, to, in a sense, look at the end of our nose. See, it's easy to read a passage like this and feel like, oh my gosh, I gotta fix poverty or homelessness, or we name them as issues in a sense, and that can make us blame other people for not fixing the issues or just paralyze us. We can't do anything about it. Let's just get together and have another worship service. But that's not actually what's going on. And here's what I've realized in my own journey, and we see this all the way through Scripture. God doesn't ask us to do something that we can't do. That's not God. God does not demand blood from a stone. He doesn't ask us to fix things we can't fix. God always asks us to do what we can do, which is actually what is right at the end of our nose. And he puts it in two dimensions here in this text. Your family, like go look at the immediate people in your household, relatives, and your home and your household, the place that you live, and the people that come through your household or in and around your neighborhood. There's your home and home life and household. And then there's the kind of the people you interact with and work with and see, and the city walls. In other words, what you can see right in front of you in your neighborhood, in your community. He's saying to them, hey, I'm not going to let you off the hook by blaming and letting anger and inaction grow. I'm inviting you to stop pointing the finger and look at the end of your nose. This is a hard word for the people, but you know what I love about this? And God always does this. God never calls us to obey for the sake of obedience. He doesn't command us to do things because he just wants us to listen to him, or just because I said so. God never says that. It's always for the sake of reward. He says, do this, then. Look what he said, verses 8 to 12. He lists all the things that can happen in our lives if we will actually listen to what he's telling us to do. Look what he says. You'll be rescued. You'll be healed. You will be led, guided, directed. You will be protected. You'll be heard by God. I will hear your prayers. The darkness in your life will disappear. It talks about light coming into our life and our soul. That's kind of a picture of hope and joy and being able to see. You will have strength. You'll be made alive. You will have a beautiful legacy. It says you'll be called, you'll be known as someone who repairs and heals and restores things. That's reputation, legacy. Think about this, being rescued, healed, led, protected, heard, light in our lives, strength, beautiful legacy. These are all the things we blame other people for why we can't get those, or they should be doing that for us. And God says, no, you take responsibility for what I've asked you to, and I will do these things for you. This is very similar to the message that Israel would get a few years later from the prophet Jeremiah, who would say, hey, seek the thriving and the welfare of the place where you are. From now on, your well-being is tied to the city where you are. If it thrives, you will thrive. Therefore, why don't you do everything you can to make it thrive? Friends, this is not about a program, or like I said, dealing with some big global issue. I mean, maybe you have an idea to start something or do something new, or you're in the middle of that. Great. But this is actually just about what is right at the end of our nose. And I thought to get really practical here as we land the plane, what is at the end of your nose? In a sense, your family and your house is at the end of your nose, right? The people you live with, whether that be roommates or family members, or you have a household, the people that you're with and the house itself. And what does it mean to build that and make it a place that's thriving and inclusive? So let me just first say, in your family, if your marriage or your relationship with your kids is in disrepair, if the relationships in your home are chaotic, you got to deal with that. You can come to all the worship services you want and prayer meetings or whatever, but God's saying, no, fix those things. Deal with that. Deal with that brokenness in your own space, in your own family, or relatives, maybe extended family, have needs or things are in disrepair. Get that right. Get your household healthy and stable and loving. And when it is, and if it is, you can use it to meet the needs around you. We know there is incredible needs around us, that there is an epidemic of loneliness around us. What does it mean to use our family, if we have a stable family or a stable home or an empty chair at our table, to include people, to invite people over within your own church community, within your neighborhood. We know we have many new Canadians coming to the country, and I've heard so many stories where people say, oh, I've invited my neighbor over, and they'll say, oh, I've been in the country for 2 years, I've been in the country for 5 years, I've been in the country for 8 years, I've never been in another person's house. What does it mean? And I'll tell you, in our street, if you're waiting for people to stand at the end of their driveway and look longingly at you, that's saying with their eyes, please invite me over for dinner, it'll never happen. You actually have to look. You may say, oh, I don't think they want to come over. You don't know that. Go ask them. What does it mean to actually do something about the loneliness that's right in front of us? We know. You don't have to guess. Most people are lonely. Most people don't have enough connection and deep connection and love in their lives. We say we have a housing crisis, or we have an international student housing crisis. What does it mean that we have maybe empty rooms as our kids move off to university or move out of the house, or we have empty space, or we have a finished basement that's mostly just a TV room or something that no one really uses? What does it mean to actually think about space that we have in our homes to help people who need spaces to live? Your family and your household is at the end of your nose. And so is your 9 to 5 or whatever school hours you go to, whatever your classes are. That's basically your workplace, the place that you were doing work, the people that you were doing with, who is in need. And that may simply be, right? This isn't about doing something new. It may just simply be paying attention long enough to what is right in front of you. The people right in front of you, they know that person looks off. They usually smile. Today they're not. Or that person for the last month has kind of been in a funk. They've kind of been snarky with me. I wonder if they're okay. I wonder if something's going on. I wonder if I need to ask, hey, are you okay? Chances are some of the people in your school or in your class or in your work know that you are a Jesus follower. Chances are some of them do. What if you were actually also known as someone who was for your work team, for your workplace, for your class, for your sports team? If they know that you are a Jesus follower, what if you were known as someone who was for? Next week, we're actually going to talk about what does it mean as a church to be for the city we are in Bolton, in Vaughan, and King. But I didn't want us to miss the chance before we start thinking about, the church and communities and identities and organizations and things like that, to go, wait, me personally, what do I have? What's at the end of my nose? What sphere am I in that the people that I can see with my own eyes, that I talk to every day, the needs that are right around me in my own flesh and blood, my own home, my own neighborhood, my own workplace, my own school? I want to come back to the promises that God says, the things that he will provide for us. If we will, it's almost like he's saying, hey, I'm for you. If you will just be for the things I'm asking you to be for, if you will be for the people and the place around you, I will be for you. I want to remind you, these are the things, the rewards that God says, I will do this for you. You will be rescued. You will be healed. You will be led and guided. You will be protected. You will be heard by me. The darkness in your life will disappear. You will have strength. You will be made alive. And you will have a beautiful legacy. Just as you look at all those things on the screen, I'm betting, chances are, there are one or two of those things that you really feel like you need from God right now. Maybe there are things you feel like you've been praying for and God hasn't been answering. Like that's kind of what the people felt like. Hey, how come you're not seeing this? How come you're not helping? Can I just give you a little bit of a prayer that I crafted? You can pray your own prayer in this next moment. It's just going to be in the quiet in your own head. But something that you can pray. If this is really what this is about, is God saying, hey, you be for what I'm asking you to be for because I'm for you. That you could just pray a prayer like this. God, you know that I need. You can fill in the blank with one of those things on the screen, maybe one or two of those. God, you know that I need to be healed. God, you know that I need to have direction in my life. God, you know that I need more strength to deal with the issues in my home or in my workplace. God, you know that I want to have a beautiful legacy or reputation. God, you know that I need protection. Whatever it is, fill that in. God, you know that I need. And then pray this. Help me trust you to be for me. And help me to be for the people and the needs at the end of my nose. Just take 1 minute and pray that prayer. God, help us to trust that you are for us. And help us to be for the people and for the needs that are at the end of our nose.